She sat in her car outside her parents' house for 45 minutes. The lights were on inside. She could hear laughter through the window, but her hands wouldn't move. Her chest felt like it was collapsing. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to drive away, so she did, and the guilt hit before she even left the driveway. What kind of daughter abandons her family? What kind of person chooses distance over loyalty? Isn't she cold? Isn't she selfish? Doesn't she owe them another chance? These questions haunted her for weeks. But here's what changed everything. She realized the guilt wasn't coming from her conscience. It was coming from years of conditioning. If you've ever felt guilty for protecting yourself from someone who hurt you, this video is for you. Today on Felis Wisdom, we're breaking down the exact psychology of why you feel like the bad guy when you're actually being the smartest person in the room. Because cutting off toxic people isn't cold, it's strategic. And it has nothing to do with guilt. Let's go. The guilt trap. Here's what nobody tells you about guilt. It's not your emotion, it's their tool. Picture this. You're a child. You say no to something uncomfortable. Maybe it's a family member who makes you feel weird. Maybe it's being forced to hug someone you don't want to touch. Maybe it's staying silent when something is wrong. What happens? Anger, tears, disappointment, withdrawal. The message is clear. Your boundary caused pain. You caused pain. You're the problem. Your developing brain files this away. It learns setting boundaries equals abandonment. And abandonment equals death when you're small and helpless. So it installs a program. A guilt program. A program designed to keep you compliant. To keep you attached. To keep you safe through obedience. But you're not small anymore. You're not helpless. Yet that program is still running. And toxic people? They know exactly how to activate it. Every time you try to leave, they trigger it. They cry. They play victim. They tell you you're heartless. They remind you of one good memory while conveniently forgetting the 100 bad ones. And your guilt fires up like an alarm system designed to protect a child who doesn't exist anymore. The second piece of this is something psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. Imagine you have a person in your life who is sometimes amazing and sometimes awful. Sometimes they show up for you. Sometimes they completely betray you. Sometimes they're warm. Sometimes they're ice cold. This unpredictability creates an addiction in your brain. You're chasing the version of them that was good. You're willing to tolerate the cruelty because you never know when the kindness might come back. It's the same psychology that keeps people gambling, checking their phones obsessively, staying in abusive relationships. It's a trauma bond. And your brain will fight hard to keep it intact. The guilt you feel when trying to leave? That's your brain screaming that you need this person. That you need the intermittent hits of validation and warmth. That leaving means losing access to those good moments forever. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. Those good moments were always a trap. They were designed to keep you coming back. To keep you hoping. To keep you small and dependent. A truly safe person doesn't require you to tolerate cruelty in exchange for basic kindness. The third layer of this guilt is social programming. Society has taught you that family is sacred. That blood is thicker than water. That cutting people off is extreme. That you should forgive and forget. That loyalty matters more than your own peace. These are beautiful sounding lies designed to protect the wrong people. They protect the abuser at the expense of the abused. They protect the manipulator at the expense of the manipulated. They protect the system that profits from your silence and compliance. And they've been hammered into your brain since childhood. So here's the first hard truth. The guilt you're feeling is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're finally doing something right. It's your old programming fighting against your new wisdom. And that fight is uncomfortable. But discomfort is the price of freedom. What toxic people actually are now, let me tell you about someone I know. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus had a friend for 15 years. They met in college. They went through everything together. Breakups, job losses, family drama. Marcus supported this friend through every crisis. But there was a pattern. Every time Marcus started doing well, his friend would sabotage him. Not directly, subtly. A comment about how he was getting too big for his boots. A story about how Marcus had hurt him in the past. A sudden crisis that demanded Marcus drop everything and help. When Marcus tried to talk about this pattern, his friend got angry. He said Marcus was being ungrateful, selfish, that he'd given up so much for this friendship, and this is how he was repaid. The guilt crushed Marcus. He stayed. He kept trying. He kept sacrificing. It took him 5 years to understand what was actually happening. His friend wasn't toxic because of circumstances. He wasn't toxic because he had a hard childhood or mental health issues. He was toxic because he didn't see himself as the problem. In his mind, he was the victim of Marcus's success. He was the one being wronged. He genuinely believed his sabotage was justified because Marcus had somehow hurt him first. This is the core psychology of toxic people. They have constructed a narrative where their behavior makes sense, where their cruelty is reasonable, where your pain is acceptable because they've decided they're more important. And here's the thing that keeps people trapped. Toxic people are often charismatic. They're often intelligent. They often have real qualities that you do value. So you keep waiting for that version of them to show up permanently. You keep thinking, if you just love them enough, if you just support them enough, if you just understand them enough, they'll change. But change requires them to admit they're the problem, and they will never do that. So let me ask you this. How long are you willing to wait for someone who will never become who you need them to be? Because that's what this comes down to. You're not guilty for leaving. You're strategic for recognizing that this is a broken equation. Think about it like this. If you were driving a car and it kept breaking down, no matter how many mechanics you took it to, at some point you wouldn't keep getting repairs. You'd get a different car. You wouldn't feel guilty about abandoning the broken one. You'd feel relieved. Toxic people are the broken car, and your job is not to fix them. Your job is to stop wasting your resources on something that's designed to drain them. The guilt says you're abandoning them. But the truth is, they abandoned you a long time ago. They abandoned your trust when they betrayed you. They abandoned your safety when they hurt you. They abandoned your emotional needs the moment they decided their ego mattered more. You're not leaving. You're accepting that they already left. The moment of decision. Let me tell you about someone else. Let's call her Valencia. Valencia had a mother who was unpredictable. Some days she was warm and present. Other days she was cold and cruel. Valencia never knew which version she was going to get. So she spent her entire childhood trying to manage her mother's moods. Saying the right thing. Being the perfect daughter. Sacrificing her own needs to keep the peace. By the time Valencia was 30, she was exhausted. She had anxiety. She had panic attacks. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't trust her own judgment because she'd spent so long reading other people's emotions instead of her own. And her mother. Still unpredictable. Still making demands. Still acting like the victim whenever Valencia tried to set a boundary. One day, Valencia sat in a therapist's office and said, "I feel like I'm drowning." And she's the anchor. And the therapist asked her one question that changed everything. "Are you responsible for her happiness?" Valencia said, "Yes." "I'm her daughter," the therapist said. "Then you'll drown together." And that was the moment. That was when Valencia understood that staying wasn't loyalty. Staying was self-destruction. And choosing herself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. She cut off her mother completely. No explanations, no negotiations, just gone. The guilt came immediately. It was enormous. It felt like betrayal. It felt like proof that she was a bad person. For weeks, she second-guessed herself. But something else was happening at the same time. Her anxiety started dropping. Her sleep got better. The constant tension in her body started to release. She realized that the weight she'd been carrying wasn't love. It was a cage, and removing the cage doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you alive. Here's what toxic people don't want you to understand. Your guilt is their power. As long as you carry it, they own you. You'll keep checking in on them. You'll keep thinking about them. You'll keep being available for them. You'll keep hoping they change. But the moment you set the guilt down, you're free. Not cold. Not selfish. Free. The psychology of letting go. So how do you actually release the guilt? This isn't about suppressing it or ignoring it. This is about rewiring your brain. First, you have to flip the narrative. Right now, your brain is telling you that leaving is abandonment. But the truth is different. The truth is that you're accepting reality. You're accepting that this person cannot give you what you need. You're accepting that staying is hurting you. You're accepting that you deserve better. That's not abandonment. That's self-preservation. Second, understand this principle. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions. You're not responsible for their pain. You're not responsible for their reaction to your boundary. You're only responsible for your own peace. When you cut off a toxic person, and they respond with anger, tears, guilt trips, public shaming, whatever, that's their choice. That's their responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself. The moment you internalize this, the guilt loses its power. Because guilt only exists when you believe you've done something wrong. And protecting yourself is never wrong. Third, do this exercise. Every time the guilt appears, interrupt it with a question. Am I responsible for this person's happiness? The answer is no. Am I responsible for my own peace? The answer is yes. Repeat this over and over until your nervous system believes it. Because your nervous system doesn't believe it yet. It's still in child mode. It's still waiting for approval. It's still afraid of abandonment, but you can retrain it. Fourth, understand that there's going to be something called an extinction burst. This is when the guilt intensifies right after you cut someone off. You might feel worse a week later than you did on day one. You might start romanticizing the relationship. You might convince yourself that you were too harsh. This is normal. This is your brain fighting to get the old reinforcement back. It's withdrawal. And you have to push through it. This is where you need support. Not from people who will convince you to give them another chance, but from people who will remind you of why you left, who will reflect your reality back to you when guilt is distorting it. Document it. Write down every betrayal, every lie, every time they hurt you, every broken promise. When guilt tries to rewrite history, you read that list. You remind yourself of the full picture, not just the good moments your brain is highlighting. And finally, understand that grief is part of this process. You might grieve the relationship you wish you had, the person you wish they were, the years you spent hoping. That grief is valid. Feel it fully. But don't confuse grief with guilt. Grief says, I'm sad this didn't work out. Grief is healthy. Guilt says, I'm wrong for leaving. Guilt is a trap. One heals you. One keeps you imprisoned. The moment after. Let me tell you what happens on the other side of this guilt. Because most people who go through this transformation describe the same thing. At first, there's emptiness. That space where the toxic person used to be. Your brain is used to them taking up all your mental real estate. So when they're gone, there's silence. That silence is uncomfortable. So your brain tries to fill it by making you think about them, by generating guilt, by making you question your decision. But if you sit with that silence instead of fighting it, something shifts. The silence becomes peace. The emptiness becomes space. Space where you can breathe. Space where you can think. Space where you can finally hear yourself. And then the benefits start showing up. Your anxiety decreases. Your sleep improves. Your immune system strengthens because you're not in constant stress. Your energy returns because you're not spending it all managing someone else's emotions. Your self-esteem rises because you finally prove to yourself that you can't be manipulated. You start attracting different people. People who respect your boundaries. People who don't require you to sacrifice yourself. People who show up for you without keeping score. You model something revolutionary for people around you. You show them that it's possible to be kind and still protect yourself. That it's possible to love someone and still walk away. That it's possible to be human and not be a doormat. But the biggest shift, you prove to yourself that you're capable of making hard decisions based on wisdom instead of guilt. That you can trust your own judgment. That your peace is worth protecting even when everyone tells you you're wrong. That's when you realize you were never the problem. You were just brave enough to stop being the solution. The final truth. Here's what I want you to hear clearly. The guilt you feel is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're breaking free from someone else's control. It's evidence that you valued the relationship enough to try. That you tried to communicate. That you tried to set boundaries. That you tried to make it work. And when none of that worked, you made the hardest decision. You chose yourself. That's not cold. That's not selfish. That's not ungrateful. That's power. The toxic people in your life need you to carry guilt because guilt keeps you attached. Guilt keeps you coming back. Guilt keeps you small and dependent and hoping. But the moment you set that guilt down, you take your power back. If this video resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to Felis Wisdom for more psychology and strategy that elevates your frequency. And comment below, what boundary are you finally ready to set? Master your mind. Master your life. Felis Wisdom. Precision. Strategy. Success.